Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 763. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have a special co-host, Tony Foster, and of course we got Corey Romero up in Utah, Mr. vExpert himself, and we got a great show going to happen today. We're going to be talking about the NVIDIA GTC conference. Tony Foster was there. I was paying attention to it as well. My roommate was there, so we got a lot of what's happening within NVIDIA and GTC. And then we'll also do a VMUG Connect wrap up in Amsterdam. That was a big one that happened last week, 500 plus people there. So good show today. But before we do that, Corey Romero, how's it going?
It's going great, Eric. vExperts, a lot of things happen with vExperts. They're kicking off. We've got this week vExpert application subprogram applications are going to be opening and kicking off for vExperts. So if you're a vExpert, keep an eye out for that email. It's most likely going to happen tomorrow.
Nice. Always good to have subprograms updated for 2026. Yep. Nice. So Tony Foster, you were here in the Bay Area last week. Got to go to GTC. Good to have you. What's new with you?
Yes, GTC. That's what's new with me. All things GTC.
Nice. Well, and then of course VMUG Connects were ongoing. The Amsterdam one was a big hit. 530 people showed up, standing room only to some of the sessions that were happening. So some of the labs were sold out as well. So I think 3 of the HOLs were sold out. Certifications were busy. So it was a busy week, and it's gonna continue to be busy. We've got we have Milwaukee happening. No, not Milwaukee, Minnesota. What's this? VMUG Connect in Minneapolis, not Milwaukee. Minneapolis, happening April 7th, 8th, and 9th. And so it's not too late to register. I know they're in the hundreds of that are going to be at that show and climbing as we come up to the 2-week mark before there. So exciting there. And then we had VMUG Connect Toronto, then Dallas, and then eventually rolling in with Orlando. But very busy, lots of great conversations, lots of good labs, and lots of people getting certified. So cool stuff.
Good to hear.
So anything else in the news before we get into Connect and GTC? I don't think I have anything else. Bob's out on vacation, so he's got his vacation going on, and I think that's about it. We are ramping up for Explore, so call for papers. Reminder to everybody that call to papers are live. You can go submit your paper requests. You get them in. You get a free pass to come to Explore, and so that's always good. And yeah, stay tuned. I know that they're going to do some vExpert passes as well, so stay tuned there. And I think last year we also had some VMUG passes as well, so for some leaders. So I haven't heard about that yet. Don't know if that's going to happen, but I know that if we're going to do the community sessions, you can do a community 20-minute quick talk. You can also get a pass there. So if you want to come to Explore, there are multiple ways to get yourself a pass to come to Explore. And I know that we're going to be focusing on some of the value props for Explore coming up, right? A lot of it is HOLs, getting HOLs. There's new version of VCF going to be coming out. So there's going to be a bunch of announcements around new versions and features, and, stay tuned for that. So learning about new VCF features, and, getting to engage with everybody that has been deployed, from getting your training to learn vSAN and NSX and automation, to then getting your certifications, lots of opportunity for career advancement. And then there are going to be, I think, more parties this year. I think there is more social events. The partner ecosystem has been coming back, right? So a little bit of opportunity to be a little bit more fun, and they are focusing the event on community this year. So again, good opportunities for that.
Nice.
Think that's all I've got in my head for news. So let's do GTC first. Tony, first question for you, since you went there. How many days was it? When did you fly in, and when did you have to leave?
So it started Sunday evening with a poster reception. and basically it went all the way up until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday.
So full on, VMworld kind of conference, right?
Full on, yes. And from what I've been told from various contacts there, 38,000 attendees, not including staff.
Oh my, that's bigger than AWS reInvent. I did not know it was that big. I knew it was big. I know there's a ton of news coming out of it, but I didn't know they were at 38,000 now. Wow.
Yeah, it took up 12 different venues in San Jose, about 5-block area. They had to shut down downtown San Jose for this.
Right. So it's kind of like Salesforce up in San Francisco, where they take over a whole block region, and it's there. I waited too late. I kind of got clued into it, sometime about 3 weeks before it happened, and by then the tickets were sold out. Right. They were, and you could get a day pass for like $600, and it just wasn't something in my cards. But for next year, I'm going to pay attention. Get early. Did you guys pay for your pass, or did you get a comp pass as a vendor?
So I paid for my pass. I actually did this on my own dime. So my whole goal of being out at GTC was to learn. So if you were looking for me in the booth at GTC and did not find me, that's why I was actually out learning as opposed to in the booth selling.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was. I kind of looked at it and saying, "Hey, I wouldn't mind going to this just to kind of pay attention to where AI is and where it's happening." So on the first day, Jason Wong, is that what we call him? Jason Young Wong. How do we no
Jensen Hong.
Jensen Hong. Sorry, yeah, Jensen Hong.
Did
the keynote, stood up and said, "Hey, AI is booming. We're doubling our forecast from 500 billion to 1 trillion by 2027." So made all the stockholders, happy. I guess maybe they're never happy, but he got up and basically said, "Look, the chip production, Blackwell, right, is going to double." But that, and then they announced new chips, right, which I think the name of that is Vera Rubin, something like that. That's their new chip version. So they're selling Blackwell, they're talking new chips, and those chips seem to be focused on not only inference but agentic workflows, right? So agentic became one of the conversations, but inference also, they don't have enough chip capacity for inference workloads, right? I'm still running when I run ChatGPT or Grok, I still get the come back later, we're kind of busy right now, right? Which is basically not enough capacity in data centers, whether it's chip supply, power supply, or whatever, right?
Correct. That is a big concern. That was one of the things you heard from just about everybody. When are you going to have chips in stock? So
right. Yeah.
You were hearing that throughout the show. And yes, whether it's inferencing chips, whether it's gaming chips, whether it's Grace Blackwell, whatever sort of chip you're looking for, there is definitely a supply shortage.
Right. When you were there, I assume they must have a lot of vendors that are also at the the booths and all that. Like what was the vendor vibe? Was it busy, and were everybody vying for their space in the AI market?
Absolutely. So for those familiar with the San Jose Convention Center, about 80% of it was dedicated to show floor.
Wow.
Yes, and that's not all they had for vendor spaces. And the show floors were packed. So they had the main conference area filled with vendors. They had another area for all of the up and coming vendors and some of the smaller vendors. And that was all in the convention center. Then they had GTC Park, which is the park across the street from the convention center, that had a bunch of vendors along one side over by the Tech Museum. and they were there. And in addition to that, they had a parking lot across the street from the park that was filled with vendors as well. So there were massive amounts of vendors at this show this year.
Do customers come there to work with vendors for hardware purchasing, right? Like where you're buying racks of stuff? I know that Jensen Huang talked about their NVIDIA's delivering rack-based systems, right? And that the new chip they kind of talked about the Vera Rubin that comes with 5 different rack configurations as what they're permitting. So I'm wondering, when you go to the show, are you expecting to figure out what hardware you want to buy going forward?
So that is absolutely an option if you want to talk hardware at GTC. All of the major vendors were there. Everyone you can think of in the AI space had a booth there. Dell had a booth. HPE had a booth. IBM, all of them had
Everybody,
booths.
right?
And then you also had the software vendors. So if you wanted to talk to people that are developing new models, new agentic agents,
Right.
or anything else, they all had booths as well. So you could find all of them there at the show, and you could talk wherever you wanted. If you wanted to talk about hardware, talk about hardware. If you wanted to talk about the middle layers of things, you could talk about the middle layer of things like, oh, we want to build our own model. Or if you wanted to talk to somebody about, hey, I need a model to do this, they were probably there.
Right. Interesting. I know that we'll talk a little bit later. I got a kind of list of things to talk about, and one of them is OpenClaw, right, and NemoClaw, and what the agentic platform is. It's like it grew to 1 million subscribers on GitHub or whatever, fastest ever, things like that. But before I get there, I'll get there. But there's certainly a lot of agentic workloads that are starting to show up, right? And then Jensen Huang was actually talking about that and talking about where they're going to grow into that business, which is why they're doubling, and they're still going to be short supplied right now. Interesting from a monetary perspective, I felt like they're going to have trouble delivering quantity, just like everybody's having trouble delivering quantity. So they're announcing things, but and they're going to be sold out, right? Like in the end. Yeah. Other thing that I noticed, so next topic that I'll pick your brain on, right, is it seems like everyone is using everyone else's services, right? Like that the industry is starting to do cross collaboration. And there were announcements about that last week, or maybe slightly leading up to that. Apple Siri overhaul. Apple announced they're going to use Google, right, to augment Siri, right? And they did a deal to use their cloud computing, but with Google's models, right? And so collaboration there. We've already know that Google uses Broadcom ASICs, right? So we're delivering the ASICs. Anthropic announced that they're going to be using Google's rack systems that have our chips in them, and that. And then NVIDIA announced that they're using Grok's language processing units, right, for some of their services, right? So everybody, and then NVIDIA announces they're going to be doing NemoClaw, right? Because why not? They could have their own security wrapped around that agentic platform. So everybody's kind of. Yeah, and I don't know if this is because they're running out of capital, so it's easier to do deals with somebody that's already made technology, or whether they're getting out of space because somebody's market leading in one area, so why not just use the market leader? And that we're seeing some setting of the AI platform crowd.
I think you have some of that going on. I also think that people are realizing some of the opportunities out there. So, for example, Apple, Siri, Google, that whole thing, if you've been following the news, is actually been bubbling for quite a while.
Right.
And they've been working on a deal around that for quite some time. So it's exciting to see that announced. And I think that's partially what you talked about. Let's use best of breed, partially about, hey, if we use Google, we can actually focus our resources on delivering things that our customers want, and Google's good enough. So I think there's a
That's
little bit
allocation
of,
of resource, right?
yeah,
Whether, hey,
absolutely,
right.
absolutely. We don't have to be best at everything. Let's focus on our strength.
So a lot of announcements there. Was OpenAI there? Were they present, and did you hear much from them? I feel like they've gotten quieter the last month or two.
So I'm sure they were there in some form. I did not see them, but it was
Right.
absolutely massive because
Yeah,
I
sure.
was doing about 25,000 steps each day.
That's like 20 miles, right? Like
Yeah,
of walking.
somewhere in that range. Yes.
That's it's crazy that I knew reInvent's going on. And I've been to Vegas for reInvent, and it's climbing up there in the 25,000 range. And just did not know about GPU conference. For GTC is GPU technology conference from NVIDIA. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So again, I'm pretty
Hardware.
sure they were. I just missed them. I was actually hanging around a lot with the quantum computing folks. So
Does that cool. Yeah, that's neat. I saw one or two announcements from those guys as well. I'm still questioning better averaging algorithms or something like that. Somebody announced
there were a lot of announcements around
some
quantum
quant
computing.
algorithms that yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, good to know. One other, as long as we're on GTC, thought it might be interesting to talk about layoffs. Right? Is anybody, I know there's buzz around the layoffs. Oracle announced that they're gonna lay off 20 to 30,000 employees in order to refocus on AI. Right? I believe that Block, the founder of Block, Jack Dorsey, announced that he's laying off like 40% of all of his workforce in order to take advantage of AI platforms, right? And then there are a couple other ones that are out there. Atlassian announced a 10% layoff in order to refocus on AI. I'm wondering if there's anybody talking about AI and employment, right? Or maybe that's just not something they're going to talk about at the conference, but it certainly been a buzz for the last couple of weeks.
So there were people who alluded to it in their sessions, and you heard sort of murmurs of it around the campus, and I think that's the best way to describe this conference is around the campus.
Right.
But there was not anything specifically called out from a lot of vendors. There wasn't anything specifically set as a conference session on the subject.
Right.
I did see, and I think this was actually Friday or Monday, Jensen had done an interview, and I saw this short clip of him doing an interview actually talking about AI, and it shouldn't be causing workers to be laid off unless they're not engaging with AI.
Right. Yeah. Then
Because yes, if
yeah.
you have workers, it should actually cause a growth in your productivity. And so if you have 10 workers and you augment those 10 workers with AI, then you have the potential to have 10 plus whatever your AI multiplier is
Yeah. That's
of
right.
work.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as the same model that what happened to VMware, where when all of a sudden virtualization ran through the x86 marketplace, you went to a 20-to-1 server consolidation ratio, which meant that your servers were going to cost 20-to-1 less, right? Because you can use less hardware. And everybody said, "Oh my God, Dell and HP and that are gonna go out of business, or what? How's this going to affect the server market?" But the reality is, it just dropped the price of how much it costs to bring up a machine, a virtual machine in this case. And what that does is when you lower the price by 20x, right? 1 to 20, guess what? Supply and demand curve, right? Demand goes up, price goes down, demand goes up, right? And that's what I'd say with AI code productivity, right? Is that you're making an engineer maybe 5x more effective, right? Using AI platforms. And the price, technically you don't need, for the next 5 years, you don't need to hire any engineers, but you'll find, just like we did with virtual machine sprawl, the demand is surged, right? And all of a sudden we just had 20 times more VMs floating around doing other workloads and other jobs and your response to the market.
Absolutely. And I think virtualization is playing a key role in what you're seeing now. We had all of these virtual machines that started to be able to do different, interesting things, and it sort of snowballed into AI.
Right.
Not maybe directly, but definitely had a hand in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it's just interesting. I see this as a capital refocus, right, and a supply and demand price curve change. But I see that you'll see demand increase. You'll see retraining of people. Guys like me and you will go to GTC and start learning what the heck is going on and where our next gig might be or might not, right, depending on what we discover. But everybody's going to refocus how they're doing their work in order to get into the supply demand curve change.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
And then I feel like it also is a hardware boom for data center operators, right? Because all of a sudden everybody's looking for low cost power, right? So let's put some AI back in the data center because we can't find enough places to power these things, right? So I've heard that from enterprise customers that they're doubling down in data center build out or retrofitting because you got power and we have AI workloads that are going to need power. Right.
Absolutely. And one of the things I was reading in one of the newsletters I get this morning is how data center construction is actually outpacing home construction for the first time ever this year, just because people want data centers in strategic locations where they can get cheap power, cheap cooling, and plenty of floor space for their GPUs and AI to run.
Which I talked to Yves Sanford, and he's like, look, anybody that needs a job, let me know because we got build out. We need people to help build out, right? So but yet that doesn't help some guys that have got laid off, right? So but it should work through the system because if you're building data centers, you need somebody that's going to be racking and stacking. You need machines in those data centers. They have to be administered. Even if you're administering them in bulk, you still need to do that work. And at the same time, VMware comes in and goes, oh yeah, and by the way, we can help manage your GPU workloads to optimize that usage of GPUs that might not be fully utilized. So that's an opportunity for us as well.
Absolutely. And that is actually one of the things that I was hearing as I was walking around and talking with people was, yes, we have our environments working and everything. We need to make sure our GPUs stay saturated. What can we do to make sure they stay saturated? How can we make sure that our workloads are taking full advantage of those GPUs? And so that is definitely something that is up and coming in the AI space, is how do we ensure full utilization of our GPUs?
Yeah, one, because they're expensive, because price is going to go up, right, as demand goes up, and then
Exactly.
yeah, and at the same time, utilizing that utilizing that so that because they are scarce, you're not going to be able to get enough of them. So being able to utilize each one more effectively means that you can do more of your projects, right? As opposed to have to putting on hold because you just can't get the GPUs needed, right? Now it's
100%. Yes.
it's a maturing of the industry because the first wave was everybody just buys and installs, and you got GPUs saying, or so, same with virtual machine server sprawl, right? In the early days, everybody just bought hardware, put in virtual VMware, and next thing you know, they got machines running. Nobody even turns them off, right? Like they had VMs running for years because it was just not worth the trouble of going and figuring out how to turn off all their VMs. They just kept buying new servers and responding to divisional workloads within their company. But now, you got to step back and go, how am I going to organize all this? And how do I take advantage of the GPUs and
Yes.
and use them effectively?
And not only that, um, but you also have to start weeding out what are good projects and what may not be so great of a project for GPU applications. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, does that one little team need its own custom chat bot for this one project that it's doing, or is a generalized corporate chat bot good enough to handle all of this? Um, and
Yeah.
so having those discussions as well is also going to be key as people start going forward into this AI space and it begins to mature.
All right, and then the last thing before we get to VMUG Connect, we'll talk a little bit about, and this is a good topic, OpenClaw and agentic workloads. So for those of you that haven't spent a lot of time, you're an IT practitioner and you haven't paid attention to AI, agentic workloads are basically the ability to have an AI interconnect with a bunch of services, right? And then do those services for you. So book your travel or order a Zoom call or whatever that service is. Spin up your own AI that connects to some LLMs on the back end to get knowledge, but then also connects to the service providers, whether it's American Airlines or Lufthansa or whatever, and be able to then act as your butler that can run around and do things. So OpenClaw, which I think was originally called like something Claude, right? Then got sued by Claude. They had to change their name so they called it Claw because it's close enough to Claude. And then they're an open source. It's an open source project, which means it's kind of like Linux. It's taken off like Linux, and now there are different versions of OpenClaw, but it's basically your own private butler AI that then interconnects with all your services. And I've been told you got to be careful because it'll connect to your services and order you groceries or whatever it's going to do, and it has permissions to do that kind of stuff. So you got to
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, you do need to be cautious with OpenClaw, especially the plain Jane OpenClaw out there, because yes, if you give it access to all your data and all your services and stuff, you may wind up getting booked on a trip to Alaska in January.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to go to
Depends what
Alaska in January, but
right.
you might get there.
Well, or it read your mail and it figured out that this is what you need to do, and it just goes off and does it for you. It says, "Hey, guess what? I did this for you today because I saw that you needed it." Right, and away you go. Right.
Yes. There's also the possibility that it could share your data, even though you don't want it to.
Right.
And so that's another concern with it. And that's actually some of what was announced around this at
Yeah.
GTC
Yeah.
was
They're
NVIDIA.
Nemo Claw. I don't know
Yes.
where they get Nemo from. It was something. Some.
So Nemo Claw actually comes from some of their agentic agents that they have, which is in their Nemotron series of
That's
agentic
right.
agents.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And so NemoClaw is a continuation of
The Nemo
Nemotron.
agentic project that they had. Right.
Yes, the Nemotron projects that they have going on. So yes.
Nice. And I guess their special sauce is that they're building a security framework around OpenClaw, right? NemoClaw will have a, ability to constrain it into a container or some boxed environment.
Correct. So it is going to be constrained. That is one of the key benefits that NemoClaw has, is being able to constrain it into a container like form, so that it's not necessarily going and booking a trip for you to Alaska in January, or going and telling all the stuff you have on your computer to somebody. So there's a lot of stuff that they're doing with it beyond that. But that's the base idea of the NemoClaw system that they announced. Yeah.
Right. And again, now we start talking about, if my example of this in my own head was that I've been doing my taxes, right? And I'm using TurboTax like everybody, right? And I'm thinking if you had an agentic, platform that could figure out where all my investment accounts are and go that you could build a relatively good NemoClaw or OpenClaw instance that would just do my taxes, and I wouldn't even necessarily need to use TurboTax, right? And this then starts affecting the SaaS providers, right? Because if all of a sudden there is agentic workflows that eliminate the SaaS provider, then you can see a lot of SaaS apps just kind of go away, right? And certainly building images, we've seen AI build me nice little images. I don't have to use Photoshop anymore. I just ask, I use ChatGPT to go build, and I spend some of that dollars on tokens, right? And so I think that some of the SaaS vendors have to be worried about agentic workflows, obsoleting their SaaS app, right? Yeah.
Yes, and that is a concern throughout the marketplace, and I've been hearing this from both sides. What do you do when your application is outdone by a AI model,
right?
Be it agentic or otherwise?
Yeah.
If an AI model can outperform your application, what do you do? And it's a great question. And
where I was going with this is from an enterprise perspective. Let's say I am an American Airlines or a Citibank or some big enterprise, company that's providing services. I would be busily building agentic workflows for my own services and then providing them directly to my customers. So, and that this is where there's going to be a mad rush for additional data center from enterprise customers, because they need to get there before Amazon gets there and takes away their business, right? They have to build an agentic flow that connects back into their services, right? So that you're connecting, their customers are connecting through their agentic services, right? That's gonna cause a lot of enterprises to invest in AI, whether they like it or not, because enterprises offer services to customers, right? And anybody that has services to customers now are technically at risk of Amazon building, through Anthropic, some interaction that makes and Amazon does this kind of stuff, right? Amazon is known to find and they're looking at their cloud data going, oh, this one's popular. I wonder if an AI can build that, right? So interesting.
Absolutely. The question no longer is, can I build a better word processor than Microsoft Word? Because the answer is yes, I can build a better word processor using AI than Microsoft Word in many cases. So now what? What do I build it? Does it make sense to build it, or do I keep using that same word processor?
That same SaaS app, right? Or do I use Yeah, and that's where I say there has been a resurgence in, again, data center build out, because
Hmm.
now that means that companies have to figure out where to get money from in order to build this, right? Some of them have cash reserves for these type of emergencies. Others will do layoffs in order to recapitalize, in order to build agentic workflows for their services, whether it's Citibank or Target or anybody else, right? You've got to worry about this, right? And you need to invest in your data center to get there, right? So I would expect AI platforms in the enterprise to start to really be, the wave that people will be architecting for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was my takeaway from last week, just reading and listening. And I'm jealous my roommate went down and spent a week there, right? And I got to listen to him talk about it. I'm jealous that you were there, right? Any other final takeaways from the conference? I know we're talking about Explore, and Explore will be 3,000 to 5,000, focusing on the practitioner. Any takeaways that you went, oh, we should be doing something like that?
So, in all honesty, my big takeaway was this felt very familiar to me. This felt like 2018-ish when VMworld was hitting its peak.
25,000 or
Uh-huh.
26,000, right? Where it's
Um,
massive crowds, right?
and so it really had that feeling to it. And there were all sorts of different people there. So you could pick your path. Did you want to go hang out with executives? Did you want to go hang out with VCs? And so there was a lot of opportunity to network there.
The thing I would say is that I haven't seen big community out of them, right? That was what made VMworld fun, was VMware Flip Cup to volleyball to runs in the morning to all VMUG parties to like the party scene and the extracurricular activity where you could get together as the groups and groups of friends. And I haven't been able to plug into that with the hardware vendors.
So the hardware vendors at GTC are sort of on the fringe of that community. A lot of the community is actually around the developer space. So this year
Right.
they ran 3 or 4 hackathons. I can't
Okay.
remember how many they had going on.
Right.
And then there were the vendor parties, of course,
Right.
all over San Jose. Um, and there are pockets of community that are starting to develop throughout the environment. So
Yeah,
it's
that's an opportunity. I might talk to VMUG next year and go like, you know what? We need to go there. We need to get some space there and just get all the VMware people together that are hanging out, playing in the AI space, right? So neat.
that'd be cool. Yeah.
I have a personal interest, that I kind of follow a little bit of this. Any cool robots? I watch the news releases and they're kind of talking factory automation and, test and dev kind of scenarios. But I'm waiting for the personal Android, business, where I can get my nice little robot to, walk around my house and check the windows.
So there were several cool robots. The one that got most of the buzz at GTC this year, and if you watched the keynote, you saw this robot on stage. There was an Olaf robot. Disney developed an Olaf robot for their theme parks, and talks like Olaf, walks like Olaf, the whole 9 yards.
Who is
And so
Olaf again? The character I'm trying to ping the character. I know I should know
Olaf
it.
is the snowman from the Frozen movie and
Yeah.
Frozen 2
Okay. Right.
movies.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The little frozen snowman guy, kid,
Yes.
thing. Got it.
Thing. Yes. I
Right.
think
Right.
thing's the
Right.
best way
Right.
to
Right.
describe Olaf.
Right. And
So
I saw the Disney press announcements on that one, right? And I was like, yeah,
yes.
okay, little snowman Disney. That's not what I want. I want like an Android. I want,
Yes.
what Tesla's built, Tesla builds I forget the
And
name of theirs.
They were absolutely there. They were there in full force at one of the Dell booths, and I'm just saying this because I was aware of it. Um, there was one of the autonomous robots that you were talking about, um, completely AI driven and stuff. It was actually out in the park, and um, two of San Jose police officers were walking through the park, and they had the robot out, and they walked up to the robot and started talking to it, and the robot carried on a complete conversation with the two officers, and then started dancing for him because the officers asked it to do some sort of a dance. I can't remember what
Course,
sort of
of course.
dance.
Right.
But yeah, it did
Yeah.
that. And
So
I know.
they were around. They were around.
Oh, yes,
Right.
absolutely. And the little food cart robots that you see driving up and down the streets,
Right.
there were whole fleets of those. I think they had 3 separate fleets from 3 different companies
Man,
on the
I
GTC
missed out on
campus.
this. I think they only do this conference once a year, right? Or do they do it twice? I kind of saw that.
So there is the main GTC conference in San
Right.
Jose.
Okay.
Then they have GTC, I believe it's called DC, which is in Washington, DC, and that's in the fall.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and that's geared specifically towards government and
Right.
things of that nature. And they used to do one over in Hong Kong, if I remember correctly, somewhere in Asia. And I don't think they've done that one since 2019. 2019 was the last one of those, if I
All right.
remember correctly.
Last one before we flip over to Connect in Amsterdam. Do they all talk in teraflops? Like, what's the vocabulary for the latest cards? Do you know what the numbers are now? Like, I know gigabits and I know megabits, gigabits, and terabits, and communication speeds, but I haven't really paid attention to floating point operations and where the numbers are on that.
So I have a hard time keeping up with those numbers because they seem to be doubling
Every
so
year.
fast.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
at least every year. I was going to say
Yeah.
about every 8 months they
I
seem
want to
to
say that Jensen
double.
Wong came back last year and said, "Oh, we're beating Moore's law, right? We're gonna, yeah,
Oh, definitely. They are definitely beating Moore's law because Moore's law applies
was
to specific CPUs as opposed to GPUs, which is parallel processing.
yeah. You can just build bigger parallel chips, right? Just
Yep.
do it. And Moore was about shrinking, and I think the GPU is just more, right? Not
Yes.
necessarily shrinking, right? Right. Yeah. That's why you need a forklift to lift some of the gear that they're coming out with, right? Like the stuff is very dense, very heavy, right? Very big.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
liquid cooling to keep it cold.
Yeah, nice. All right, let's flip over to VMUG Connect. VMUG Connect in Amsterdam happened last week, and I wasn't there, but I am going to be in the Minneapolis one coming up. But we did a day 0 there, where we had an AI birds of a feather, we had a security birds of a feather, and we had a VCF birds of a feather, and those were standing room only, right? People were standing around. It was a pretty nice big room, like 40, 50 seats in it, and there were just people standing around and having open conversations and question and answers. And one of the things that people mentioned was, I was talking to Brad Tompkins yesterday about it, like the takeaways, and he was like, yeah, we need more ask me anything open flow type of sessions at Connect, because people have a lot of great questions, right? So we assume that someone's going to do a session, present the whole thing, and then you get some questions at the end. But if you do these type of ask me anything, just conversational, bi-directional conversations with community, that's a really popular thing, because then you can actually have interesting topics that are covered that maybe the original speaker knows the answers to, but didn't even think about putting that in their deck, right?
Absolutely. I remember back in 2012 at VMworld. So really going back there.
Yeah.
We sort of had that going there for a short while, where come on in, and we're just
Yeah, we
going
had
to have a birds of a feather session.
we had some of those going on. So that was super popular. Again, they had 520 people show up. Everybody paid their conference fee, which I think is like $400 for. And it turns out that what VMUG realized is that 3 days is actually good. 2 days is too short. I try to convince them that when I'm on the board, right? I'm like, a good 2.5 day. That's why I made them. It was me that said, let's take the first day and and remember the old underground conferences we do,
Yes.
right? And I said, let's just do an underground conference on the day that people fly in, and if you fly in early, you get to come to an underground conference kind of thing and get to chat with the community, right? And they were like push back, but eventually I got them to do it. And then now they're doing it. Now they want to make it. They came back to me going, hey, I know it was day 0 underground, but we're gonna call it day 1 community session. I'm like, okay, fine. As long as it's a birds of feather, ask me anything in that first day, it's good. I still would rather have a day 0 underground, but that's good. And that was super popular. The underground kind of get community to talk to one another in a forum that everybody can, feel free to stand up and ask a question, right? It's one way to get to know everybody, and two, have some interesting dialogue, right? As opposed to canned sessions. So that was popular. They also did leadership training. So the VMUGs in the European region, I think like 25 or 30 of them got to come together and, to build action plans to how to, get people together. And Tony, this is one of these things that I question, right? When it's, do you need to get together with community members, right? Is there still a purpose for that, right? In the old days, that was the only way you got information, was to go meet with everybody and discuss what the problems were. Now, geez, you can get information everywhere. We can get it on Zoom calls. We can get it on Twitter. We can get it, through our AI engines. The sharing is so much that, like, do I need to go drive to a meetup and meet with my community members to ask questions? Or is it purely a social thing? Is it just having fun? Or is it a career thing you can focus on? But what is that value prop to get chapter meetings to come together, right? And so a little bit of conversation and leadership training on what is the value prop for chapter meetings, right?
Awesome. I think that's a good thing, because I think the answer to your question is a definite yes. I think it has just changed from what you and I know as the reason for these social meetups to something a little bit more refined. And so I think enabling VMUG leaders with that information and helping them refine their message is a really important thing. So I'm glad to hear that happened up in Amsterdam.
Yeah. And they're doing it in Minneapolis. They're going to do it in Toronto. So that's part of that format. The day 0 sessions are also part of that format. And we're keeping the community going. And as far as a 2-3 day event, they're super popular, right? So people see value in, hey, let me take 2 days off, right, and go to a conference where I can see everybody and engage with professional people doing talks, engage with the communities at large. And that's kind of like a super chapter meeting, right, where you're going to have 300 people or 400 people there. It's still small enough that you can intimately engage with people, right? The session's a 50-person room, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just, hey, I need to drive somewhere to have a beer and have a 3-hour meeting with my local chapter. So it seems like these things are popular, and chapter meetings are, well, maybe not. So it's interesting, right? That is an interesting event paradigm shift, maybe, right? So we'll see how that goes. And I know that partner ecosystem is back, and partners were happy. I mean, when you have target at 500 and you make 560 reg and 530 show up, that's that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. And a lot of fun. People got together afterwards, and would go out in groups. So happy about that. what else? The keynote was good. Duncan Epping and others were doing talks, and Chris Wolf and I think it was Chris Wolf or Chris McCain. Can't remember which Chris was there, but did a keynote there, as well as just a bunch of community talks. So great event.
So out of curiosity, were any of these sessions recorded?
No, I don't believe any of them were recorded. I think that's not. It's interesting, right? That we could, but
I'm just like, that'd be sort of cool to log into VMUG Advantage and go, ooh, let's go see what Duncan said.
yeah, record that.
Mhm.
I know that Explore does that, so I think they, like how many of these sessions are going to be unique? Because I think a lot of the Connect is going into regions where maybe you weren't going to fly to Explore, right? In Vegas, and so you can go to your local one. It is interesting to figure out whether we should be recording these or not. I know we had that conversation, and in the end, that costs money. I think VMUG was just trying to figure out whether they could break even on, VMUG's a charity, so they're not really out to make money. They just want to pay for themselves. And I think this one paid for itself. I think they probably broke even or made a 10 or 15K extra, at the end of it. We have a board meeting tomorrow. I'll get to learn more on the economics of it, but they got sponsors and that, so probably break even. Getting cameras in every room, right? Yeah, that's expensive, right? That's why it becomes a $2,000 ticket, not a $450 ticket, right? So I know that a lot of I haven't got the numbers of how many people took their certification, but I know that almost all the certification slots were sold out. So the Connect allows you to go sit for your VCP, as well as some VCAP. So I think that
awesome.
you could go do that. And I know they were full. I should get a number of how many people took the test and how many people passed. I'm curious to see what the number is, right? Like how likely are you to pass on your first go around when you sit down? Probably the Europeans do better than Americans, right? Or so we'll see what the numbers are. But my guess is probably 100 plus people. I think we ran an event in St. Louis last year and we had 120 or so, and this was bigger. We only had 300 at the St. Louis event last year, so they got 500. They might actually have had everything full. And then I know HOLs were oversubscribed, that the 3 of them were booked out totally. VCF and a couple, and automation. I think automation was the automation lab was completely booked out for the 2.5 day event timeline. VCF was booked out, and one other one. I don't know what the other one was, but again, a lot of people, taking advantage of learning for sure.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about conferences is the ability to go and learn.
I feel like it gives me a shot in the arm on the career, right? Like I feel like, okay, I'm just not lost out here in in my day job, right? That I feel like there's a lot of other people doing the same thing as me, right? And I like that. Makes me feel good about myself, right? Yep. All right, we're coming up. We've been streaming for 53 minutes. We're at the top of the hour. So Tony Foster, great that to hear somebody that got to go to the conference, and you put man, how much did you pay for the ticket? Was a couple grand, right? Was it?
So I got the really early bird pricing with alumni discount. So I think mine was only 1,500.
No, but still, that's like out of pocket. That's, I give you credit. Next time you're in town, you could have stayed at my house in Palo Alto. I would have happened. I got a guest bedroom, but there's something to be said about that. Being in a hotel downtown, right? Because,
yeah, it was. So you say that, there were people, I talked to people who were actually staying at SFO and commuting
down.
Yeah.
I need to start Airbnb, between the Super Bowl that we had in San Francisco, we got big conferences going on. I could be Airbnb my room out for the tech conference venues, no problem.
There you go.
But next time we'll go together. I definitely want to go next year. Yeah, when they do it, let's get together. We'll go hit that show.
Awesome.
as usual, we live stream on youtube.com/vbarbecue, VBARBECUE. Go there, give us a like and a follow if you like our content and want to stay abreast of when we do these. We do these every week. We try to do them Wednesday, 12 to 1 every week. And sometimes we have guests, sometimes we have good content, sometimes just us talking about stuff. But as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for showing to the end. I see we have 24 people on the live stream. We live stream every week, and appreciate you guys listening to us. And give us a like and a follow if you want to. V Barbecue. It is now warm in California. It's been sunny and in the 70s, and I got tri-tip again. I want to do some ribs, and I'm excited about doing both of those. I definitely am going to do ribs this weekend, and happy about that. I put in my garden. I got rose bushes we put in, so that we're in the summer game now, right? And with that, obviously, comes barbecue. And yeah, I bought the tri-tip yesterday when I was at Costco, and
Nice.
and I'm gonna go get some nice ribs at Piazza's, one of our high-end stores, and gonna do my no longer 3-2-1, because that makes everything fall off the bone too much on ribs. And I'm gonna do just a temperature modeling smoke on my Traeger. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, I did chicken this last weekend.
Nice.
So
Did you do a whole chicken? Sometimes I splay the chicken out, a whole chicken out. Sometimes I just do thighs and drumsticks.
I thought about it, but I was cooking for my in-laws, and my mother-in-law isn't a fan of seasoning on most of her grilled
meat?
foods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So it's really hard to just do a whole chicken without seasoning.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
I did thighs and chicken breasts, and hers didn't get any seasoning, and everybody else's had the full work of seasoning.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, it's summertime, so we should be getting reports. Bob will be back next week, and we'll continue on. Until then, everybody go get some barbecue and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Tony.